Hello everybody, this is Nick DeTiro, Professor of Information Technologies and Computer Science, Lakeland Community College. All right, in the first two videos, we just basically read the data. In video one, we did a simple text file read using read lines, and read line. And we'll talk about those in more detail in this video also. And then the second video, we decided to do something with that data. If you remember, the data was all passwords. And we said, okay, in the second video, we'll take those passwords and we'll see how strong they are and we'll generate a hash value associated with them. In this video, we want to save our results, right? And we're going to do it two ways. One is we're just going to save the results. And in the second way, we're going to save it in a format. Let's first take a look at just saving the results. Let's go up to my screen. All right, so in the first program we're going to look at, and it's something we've seen before. Let me make it just a little bit bigger. I should have did this before we started. All right, this is the read command. This is the command that's going to open up a text file and just save everything in that text file as a string, and then we can use that string. Normally used for very small situations, maybe a single line or a single entry. So here is the module that's going to calculate a password strength. Remember, I'm pulling one password from the file. Here I'm going to hash it. The module for hashing. This is the open for the file to read. So we're going to read this 99a_1 password.txt. It's a simple file that just has one line in it with a password. You will notice that I'm opening it as a file object called F and am opening up as read only. That helps with efficiency. If we don't need to manipulate the file, then we don't manipulate it. We just leave it as read only. Now, in this video and in this series, we're going to start writing the information. It's not just good enough to bring it back to the screen. We want to send it to a text file. So here is this creation of this object. I'm going to call it file O, the object O. I'm going to open up a file called 07a_1 password.txt. Right there, we see the write command. As I've mentioned before, there's generally two ways we can write to a file. One is we write to a file and we basically overwrite the file if it's already existing. So if the file's already there, a write will overwrite that file completely. Versus an append, if you saw an A there, what it would say is if there's a file there, we're just going to put what we're saving at the end of the file. Very common approach when we're using log files. You don't want to overwrite log files, and many log files are text files, especially in the Linux environment, and they just keep appending to the bottom of that file. For simplicity's sake, we're just going to do a write, which means every time I run this program, it's going to overwrite the output file. Keeping things simple, there is our read command, our read function. So we're going to read the entire file, which happens to be one line, and we're going to put it into a string called password. We're going to find a hash value. We're going to do something. So we're going to find a hash value associated with that string. Then we're going to find a password strength. I mentioned this in other videos. If the password strength is below 0.33, it's considered weak. If it's above 0.66, it's considered strong. Then we're going to write to that file. You will notice a little bit of a difference. When I just print it to the screen, I can print it as a line, and print will take care of carriage returns and new lines. But when I write it using the write command or write function, it's going to keep appending it to the same line. So it's going to keep writing to the same line. So if I was to try to put this as one write statement, it would just, first of all, it would have problems, but it would try to write it into one line. So what I have to do is I have to break it up into smaller pieces. This is normal. So what will happen is in this particular environment, it's going to write the password. That's what this line does. It's then going to immediately write a space after the password on the same line. And then it's going to write the strength of the password on the same line. It's going to put another space, and then it's going to write the hash digest or the hash value. Then finally, the last thing on that line will be a new line. That's what the /n represents. It's carriage, meaning new line. So let's run this and let's take a look at the file. So this is the output right here. This is the screen output right here. But let's take a look at the file. So if I open up that file, there it is, sorry. If I open up that file, you can see there's the password, there's a space, there's a strength. So it interpreted that as a 1.0 or a 100% strength. So I guess a uppercase P, @SSW, uppercase, the number O, RD, sees it as a very strong password. It's really not, but it's a simple calculation. Puts another space and then puts the hash value. No big deal. Let's take a look at read lines. If you remember from the first series of videos, the first two videos, read lines looks at the entire file that you're going to read, and then at every new line, it's going to take that item on that line and put it into a list so we can use that list throughout the program. Really nice way of dealing with data that we're going to reuse, but you're not going to have a lot of data, maybe 1,000 pieces of data. It depends on your memory. I've done it up to about 4,000 or 5,000 without causing too much issues with my memory, but we don't want to get much bigger than that, but that's up to the programmer. And again, if we look at this code, we have the password strength module, we have the hash live module. Again, very similar to the first one, we're opening up a file with 1,000 passwords. It's going to be opened up as a read only. Then we're going to create a file object called O. That's for our output. It's going to output to the file 07b_1_1000 passwords. And we're going to write to that. Remember, write means it would overwrite if that file is in existence. Append would put it at the end. Here is the one line password list in which we read the entire, where we would read the entire document, and every single line is going to be put into a list. Also, at that line, we'd have a new line character, and we can strip that out. This right here, I sort it just to make it a little bit fancier because I want to do a list operation. And then we're going to have to iterate through that list. And that's the really nice thing about read lines. It allows you to create that list that we can do stuff with the list. We can iterate through it. We can look for certain strings in that list, et cetera, et cetera. As we're iterating it, every new password, we're going to get a new hash value. We're going to calculate the password's complexity or the password strength. We're going to print out those lines to the screen, standard output. And then very similar to the previous, we have to break things up a little bit. So rewrite the password, stripping out the new line character, put a space there, write the strength rounding by 2, put a space there, and then put the hexadecimal value, then finally writing a new line. Let's run this program and let's see what that file looks like. All right, that was really quick. Let's see what the file looks like. And there is the file. There's the passwords. We have spaces. We have the values, space, and then we have the hash value. Finally, in this part, what if we have very large files? This one is going to be working with 10 million passwords. It's not practical to do it as a read. It's not really practical to put 10 million passwords into a list. It's going to overflow my buffers. So I'm going to have to read one line at a time. Now, in the read lines, I can always go back to that list and I could work with that list throughout the program. With a read line, it's sequential. I'm going to take care of that file and then we're done. I'm not going to be able to go back to that file unless I completely reread it again. So We have password strength, hash lab. Here is our creation of our file objects. Here's the open. There is the write. Here is the very first read line, so the very first line of the file. This is the while statement that basically says, as long as I have a password, as long as we have a password, we don't hit the end of the file, then it's going to go through exactly what we've seen before, right? With the exception, it's not creating a list. It's iterating through the file as we work with the file and as we print. And then the last thing in the while is go out and get another line. Now, this is going to take a little bit of time. So let's run it. It's going through 10 million passwords. So I'm going to pause the screen here for a second. When we come back, I'm going to look at that file. All right, that took about 2-3 minutes that you didn't have to watch there. So it went through 10, even that, went through 10 million passwords in about 2 minutes. Now, about those password files, let's start with the 10 million passwords. That is a password file that was created on the internet. It was at a pen testing site, a GitHub, in which you can use those passwords for brute force attacks. And what people have done is when passwords are discovered, when they're pawned, they keep records of those and they basically say, don't use that password because now I can use these password files in a brute force attack. So if you're using that password and I'm testing a password database, it's going to crack it very, very easy. If you're interested in actually cracking these passwords, doing pen testing and testing password files, take the ethical hacking course, ITIS 2355. We talk in great depth about that process. But anyways, 10 million passwords in about 2.5 minutes. If I open up that file, it's going to complain to me, right? It's going to give it a second. The file is too large. So the file, I can't even edit this file because now the file is pushing the edge of the envelope. But here's the passwords. Here is the space. So password space, strength of the password space, and then a hash value. I'm just making stuff up here about the strength. I mean, the strength is the strength and the hash is the hash, but I'm just using those as demonstration. So I'm kind of, making up the demonstration portion. Now, let me warn you about these 10 million passwords. Are there curse words in there? Absolutely. Are there swear words in there? Are there words that are fairly inappropriate and to a certain point almost disturbing? Yeah, that's part of pen testing. That's part of cybersecurity. You do this stuff long enough, you know when people are using swear words or inappropriate words or catchphrases that are just not, they would never say them in public, but yet they choose to use them in password. Now the next step. This is not a good format. Separating things by spaces can cause issues, especially if you're creating files that maybe has strings to it. We don't have a string. We really don't have a sentence or a string here, but this would be a bad formatting procedure. So we use text files, as I mentioned in the first video, as they're kind of the lowest common denominator. Fine. Is there another lower common denominator that we can use as a text file? Yes, and that's called comma separated values. So instead of spaces separating things, we can put commas there. Now, if we have long strings that have spaces in, we can put quotes. So we can see, hypothetically, we'd see like password, comma, strength, comma. And let's say the next thing was a sentence. We'd have quote, and then we'd have the sentence with the spaces. So there's ways to get around commas and stuff like that. But so comma separated value in those files are a extremely important tool that we use in ITCS. We can read them into Excel spreadsheets. We can import them into databases. So it is a nice feature. Now, to do that, like pretty much everything else in Python and Java and other programs, we can have somebody else write the code for us or write the module for us. So in this example, we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to open up the files, and then we're going to massage the data, and then we're going to print it back out or put it into the file. But this time, we're going to create comma separated values. So make it a little bit more formatted. So little things that we have to do. First of all, there's our password strength. And now we are going to be using CSV, which is a module designed to create comma separated values. So you can see how important this is. We use it all the time. I had the wrong files open. That's why there's a skip there. Okay, so what do we have here? We have the password string. We've seen that in other in other programs. We have the hash lab. Now we're introducing another library. You probably saw it, me use it in other videos and other explanations, called CSV. Comma separated values are so important that there's entire modules associated with it. So let's take a look at it. Most of the stuff we've seen before, right? So basically, there is the creation of the read object file, the F. Slight little change here. All right, I'm going to call this O_CSV. No big deal. I'm going to tell it to write it, and then I'm going to tell it to put a new line. I'm going to put that right into the string there. Then I'm going to create an object called file writer using the CSV module. That's going to allow me to create an object that's going to allow me to write to a CSV file. A little different, not too much different, but a little different there. The first thing I'm going to write to the CSV file is the title or the titles. So the first column will be passwords, the second column will be complexity, and the third column will be SHA-256. That's going to tell whoever eventually uses the CSV file what that information is. So the first thing we do with a CSV file is we put the column headers. Then pretty much the same general approach. Now we don't use the write function anymore. We use the object we created called FileWriter.WriteRow, right? Meaning write this row. And in that row, we're going to do the password, we're going to do the strength, and we're going to do the hex digest. Let's run this program. Now this is going to be the read, which means it's going to take the entire file and turn it to a string, and then we'll manipulate the string. This one's kind of boring, but let's run it anyways. All right. And if we look, where did it put it out? In the 8. Now, you'll notice the color shift, and that is because I added a feature to my PyCharm. And the feature says, if I'm doing comma separated values, change the colors, right? So it's a nice little feature of PyCharm. It's not really a Python thing. It's a PyCharm thing. So you'll see why this is a nice feature in a bit. But anyways, there's our header, and there's our values. Let's take a look at read lines. Again, read lines says, read the entire document, put it into an item list. You've heard me say this over and over again. We're going to use the CSV module again. We're going to open up these files. We're going to open a CSV file, right? This writer here says that's the object. That's going to be the CSV object that's going to allow us to write a comma separated value. First thing we write is going to be the top row, and then we read the entire file into a list called password list, and then we sort it just to kind of do something extra on the list, and then we iterate through the list, right? Here's the iteration through list. We find the hash value, we find the strength, and then we have the password, and then right here, we print it to the file. We print it to the CSV file, not using the write, but using the CSV object that I created called file writer. Use the function or method called write row, and then write that information out, and then reclose it. So let's run this. This will be a little bit quicker. All right, that was fairly quick. So let's open up that document that was created. Give it a second. Now you can see the color, why I choose in my PyCharm to color coordinate the CSV. So anything that is orange is the password, red is complexity, and I guess this is purple or chartreuse, I don't know, magenta, I don't know colors, it's purple to me. So if I scroll around, you see how it stays consistent. I know anything that is orange is a password, anything that is red is a complexity, and then anything in this purple is a hash value. So it's a nice feature in my PyCharm environment. I can then take this document and feed it into an Excel spreadsheet. I can import it into a database. Let's take a look at read line. So, not going to go through everything that we did in the other ones because I've talked about it twice already, but basically we're doing a CSV. We're writing to a CSV file. Here's our writer. Here's our looping through here. Here's the last thing, and then let's run this. And away it goes. 10 million passwords. So let me pause here. It's going to take about 2-3 minutes. You don't need to watch it. If you happen to see a curse word there, I apologize. But let me pause it, and we'll come back. And 2 minutes later, I'm back. Even, again, 10 million passwords. I did some calculations. I did some hashing. 10 million passwords only took about 2 minutes to run through, a little bit less than 2 minutes. But let's take a look at that file. Now you're going to notice something real quickly when I go to that file. The file is just too big to manipulate. It is so big, the color coordination that I use in PyCharm won't even show up on this. It's just too big. That's why I had to use the read line. It was so big, I couldn't put it into a list. But it does the exact same thing. I'm just not seeing the color coordination here. I got the password, complexity, and SHA. Everything is going to be separated by the commas. So let's wrap some things up. A lot of stuff in this video. I kind of added two things together. One is just printing stuff or writing stuff to a file and then writing nice formatted stuff to a file. You can expand any of these techniques to not just do text files, but you can do PDF files, Word files, Excel files. You can read from a database, write to a text file, write from a database, read, and then write that into a database. So there's a lot of variations to it. There's gonna be one more video in this series, and we're gonna make things just a little bit easier, right? So that being said, let's go and learn something.